It's the Montana State Seal.
Oh, okay.
Can you see me right now?
Oh, nice. I like that.
Baby got back.
It's a Fresh Life. It's a Fresh Life issued thing. Each state we're in has these.
Oh, nice. Nice.
All right, friends, we are live now because I just got a notification. So those of you who you're joining us for the first time, we actually joined each other thinking we were on live, already talking amongst ourselves already. But yes, we are joining She's Velvet Steel Girls live, and we're allowing the boys in today.
Thank you.
We don't normally let the boys in, but today we said if you trim up your beards a little, if you shower and put on black hoodies, we'll let you in. No. And if you're wondering why one of these kids is doing her own thing, I've got a cupcake onesie on, courtesy of our friend Cece. I know you are missing her sweet face today. So her sweetness is represented in a cupcake onesie that she so lovingly gave to me, and we have matching ones apparently. And then I've got Jen represented because we have matching cuffs. So Jen and Cece, we love you. They did think it would be a little awkward to sit on this conversation with the hubbies and be kind of the third and fourth wheels. So we said, all right.
Wouldn't be able to be on.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Now, does Eric have a matching cupcake Speedo?
I feel like it's the new lingerie. It's the Montana lingerie. It's cold there.
There could be a reveal here, but I don't know.
One zipper. That's all.
We won't be doing that today, but we are going to jump into that ocean without Speedos, or maybe I shouldn't say it like that. The figurative ocean we're going to jump in deep because we've got some deep topics, and we asked the guys to jump in. Thank you for your bravery and courage, boys. Thanks, Ryan, for saying yes to Reagan. I don't even know if he knew what he was committing to.
It's like wearing a blindfold. Somebody's going to push you in the deep end. You don't even know it's going to happen, though, right?
It's called life. That's called life in the Murray House.
Yeah, I was like, hey, don't forget, we've got coffee talk. We do? Yeah, we do. We're jumping on today. No, we are going deep. We're going to talk about this coffee talk this topic came out of a conversation we had a few weeks ago with our friend Brooke. When Brooke came on and we interviewed her, Brooke shared her story, which was so incredible, but it was the story of tragic loss for her and her husband, where they had adopted a boy unofficially, and a week before the official adoption, things all took a turn. The mom was killed in an accident, and then they moved to the States, and years later found out that he had killed himself. So she talked to us about her process in that, and what she learned, what she gained, and what she lost. And so the interesting thing in that conversation is she did bring up her husband. He was not on to represent himself, but she just talks about how they processed it all differently. And so we were thinking about that, talking about that behind the scenes, and think that it's a worthwhile conversation. So Ryan and Reagan, before we get too deep, let's wade into the water a little bit. Ryan, how do you know, and be careful on how you say this, because I don't want you to leave this conversation in trouble, but how do you know?
I do have an angelic glow kind of going around me, so, you know.
You do. You look like you're going to do well today.
It's the presence of the Lord.
How do you know when Reagan is not doing well? Like she's just, it may be a mood, but it may be that she's struggling with something. How do you know?
Well, on Tuesday, no, I'm kidding. It's, I can kind of tell that Reagan's kind of in that mode. And sometimes I can kind of see it building up, because I know that Reagan is a person who doesn't like to say no. And she loves to be a part of a lot of things. And so as I can start to see things kind of piling up in terms of her schedule, I know one thing she likes to do, or not likes to do, but ends up doing, is overloading herself with stuff, and not necessarily important stuff, but just, engaging stuff with other people. In the moment, it seems, greatly important, but then it's kind of like, if you step back in the context of what direction she's going for the day or what she needs to focus on, sometimes those lower priorities kind of slip up and, or creep up. And, but when she, I can kind of sense, because, I noticed that, well, first of all, she's very she'll say it, because,
It's very clear.
so it takes her about 3 or 4 times to say it for me to actually register that something's up. Maybe it's in the way she said it. I don't know.
That's a
But, but no, it's, and I'm pretty fortunate that she's got, that you never have to wonder what she's thinking because it comes out, and that's good or bad, but in this context for today, it's good. And so I feel like one thing I'm fortunate with is I don't have to guess a lot. Whereas sometimes I think if I'm in that spot, she might have to prod and guess a little bit. So, I guess I'm wearing the apron and she's wearing the tool belt. And, I don't know what that is. Anyway.
I don't know either.
So,
Yeah.
but it's
So pretty much you're saying thank you for making it obvious. Thank you for just saying it out loud.
in
Thank you for
certain
repeating
contexts. In certain contexts,
Okay. I
there's
just thought I
other
was saying it
contexts that.
like- Thank you for helping me understand your heart.
I heard the appreciation to that.
Yeah.
There you go. There you go. There you
It
go.
was really honoring.
We're there, Eric.
So Reagan, how do you know if Ryan is not doing well? Like you can tell that something's going on with him.
Because he's not saying it. When he gets, I can tell, we're just, everybody has their thing. And if I know, number one, if he doesn't get his exercise in the morning, and then he comes home and he's just more agitated, like an instant with our kids, not that kids can't instantly agitate you, or he just kind of like, even if he calls me by my name, he says, Reagan, okay, I'm ready to eat, Reagan. Like, whoa, what's like red light? We just don't use each other's first names. I don't know if anybody else does that. We have our nicknames for each other. You just say loves, whatever we're gonna call each other that day. But
and we have our upstairs nicknames.
It's like dirty SBS. I like it. All right, it's like PG-13 right now.
That's what happens when you invite the boys in or eighth grade out of all of us.
Well,
That's
on
it.
the nickname thing, this has cupcakes and candy on it. And one of his nicknames for me is
Sweet cheeks.
he goes.
That doesn't make me think of cupcakes or candy.
Yeah, so I don't know where that nickname came from. I have no idea. Anyway,
I do.
Now
I'm not gonna-
I'm really representing it.
Part two.
All over me, but yeah. Okay, so you can tell just by tone of voice, by the way he talks to you or doesn't talk to you, something's not quite right.
Yeah, I think as women, we definitely have we're always, part of a positive. Yeah, we have a good perception of the household, and you can literally, for me, I can tell the minute he comes into the door, like something's not right. Like he doesn't address me the same way. He's just like, and it's like, I just see him at work, we're mad, and you're like, okay, so why don't you go for a run? Like, why don't you, go do whatever you need to do? Whereas, like, I think for him with me, I could be like, man, I was having a rough day. He's like, yeah, I know you got a lot going on. Like, no, I just said I'm having a rough day. You tell me to go upstairs and eat alone. Like, enjoy my time. Like, you've got the kids. But it's not his lack of not wanting to help me. And again, I just have to say it 2 or 3 times, and then I start crying, and they say, whoa, maybe you should just take a little time alone. He's like, as I said 4 hours ago. But, it's okay. We're only 13
I
years
want her to
in.
earn it. I want her to earn it.
Yeah.
He wanted to earn it.
I'm not really sure for the first 3 times.
Yeah.
4th time.
Gotta add the little tears on there, and then
Yeah.
he figured it out.
I hear
Yeah. So just so you in the SVS land know, Reagan and I have been friends for 20 years, about something like that. And then Ryan just was like a bonus friend because he came along a little bit later. And Eric was friends with Reagan as well, but we weren't married at the time or dating actually. And she probably would like to take some credit for being instrumental in the setup. Like she kind
Absolutely.
of pushed
Quite a lot of credit.
it. Yeah.
We still owe you.
So we kind of know the backstory of a lot of what you guys have walked through in life. But for today's context, okay, we were just kind of like wading in the water right there. So now we're going just a little bit deeper, kind of the part where you go with the water a little bit. So we're going in.
Get you in that certain
Ryan
spot.
and Reagan. Yeah, so I think that there's kind of 2 parts to this story, but let's start with the together disappointment. So Ryan and Reagan gosh, was it 2007 that you did a church plant in Huntington Beach?
2006, yeah.
2006. Okay. So Ryan and Reagan, you started a church, and then that eventually came to a place where you just felt like it needed to stop for whatever reasons. And so tell us about that, because we know that story as well on our end. But tell us about how you guys processed the ending of a dream, really, and how you maybe processed it differently. But Ryan, you start out, because that was kind of your big dream first, wasn't it?
Yeah. And it's funny because the entire process, whenever I kind of felt the Lord kind of calling me to go that direction, it was even before I met Reagan, I didn't want to go that direction. I was kind of doing something that I absolutely love to do, and I didn't want to be pulled away from it. And, but whenever the Lord has plans for us and a timing, we can either jump on board or we can, kind of get left in our own stuff. But so eventually when I wrapped myself around that, that was all I could think of and be, and want to do. So as we went into that, it's just like we're fully invested. We've invested, our time, our finances. We purposed every relationship that we wanted to build, not just wanted to build that, but just with even more intentionality.
And I want to give just a little bit of context really quickly here. So we planted the church in 2006, like October of 2006, and we had our first baby in October of 2006. So we each had our own babies at this moment. So when I'm sitting there excited that she opened her eyes and looked at me to share with him, when you're planting a church, it's very intense. He's off, putting out signs alone, setting up equipment alone, and like all encompassed with this church. And I'm like, oh, look at the baby did this. And he's like, well, look, we're still, how do we reach more people? How do we do that? I've already worked my message. So it was, I think you got to remember, in the context, not like we both had this amazing vision of let's plant this church. Like now I have a baby and he has a baby. So we each have our own babies, where in reality, both of these kind of should be, the focus of one of us or both of us at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
And then, just kind of as we went along, it had started to grow. And then right around when the economic downturn hit, we had a lot of young people in our church and who weren't from California. And so they ended up losing their jobs. And when they did, there it kind of went. Everybody that they had drawn in hadn't quite acclimated yet to really dig in roots and all that. So over the course of even a summer, really, we went from 50 to 12 people, and that was tough. And so, personally, I went through, a bit of not really bitterness, but just kind of disappointment, because when we set expectations, we expect it to either happen a certain way or within a certain time frame. And when anything that doesn't happen the way we set it up, whether it's a vision like this, or we feel that I'm supposed to meet the perfect one and I'm supposed to do X, Y, and Z to get myself prepared, and it doesn't happen the way that we planned it out in our minds, which is just one slight variation throws it off from that, then, disappointment ensues. And then we start to kind of question a lot of things around us. And, but as we were going through that tail end of it, Reagan was extremely supportive. And one of the big things that I kind of felt like, and I don't know if I'm getting off topic or not, but that God was kind of sharing with me was he kept reminding me that, he's called us to obedience, not performance. And the bigger key was that I walked through this whole thing with obedience, or we did as a family. And, that was more what he desired more than whether we were to grow a big church per se. He loves his church, but he loves the people who are in his church. And that's really what it's about. And it's it's about, what we accomplish for the kingdom, but more importantly to his heart is my heart and her heart. So,
well, and the non-spiritual aspect of it, just to, break it down for people who haven't planted church. So now we've closed this thing that my husband's now invested, 2+ years of his life in. We invested our entire savings into this. Okay. And in that process of when we started the church, we had our first baby, then we had our second baby. Now it ends. Now I've got 2 babies. we don't have this thing. We don't have our, safety net of savings. We've spent this whole deal. And now I'm dealing with a man that's, slightly depressed, a little hard. I mean, definitely you had the right thing. And, for me, I'm trying to figure out like, okay, God, because it could be any circumstance. How do I now be encouraging to him? And to be honest, I'm a little bit like irritated that we've spent all this time, like irritated at God, happy that, we're going to have no regrets. That's what we told each other. We'll have no regrets. We did it all. Like, absolutely. Are we going to ever say like we never applied to church and we should have? No, we did it. Okay. Done. Back. But, just there is some regrets of like, wow, you missed some of this or that, or, like all this time and money and effort we spent on this baby, his baby. And now we've got these 2 other babies that like, it was, and for me, so everybody knows, even though I cry a lot, I am a sympathetic person. I can cry anything, but at the same time, I'm a little bit, and my husband will tell because he's married to me, I'm a little bit of like a kick butt person. Like I kind of like to give the sympathy. I give my amazing advice. And then it's like, after that, I'm like, wow, you're still crying? You're still depressed about this?
But sometimes the order doesn't quite come out in that fashion. So.
So I just felt like, we were at that moment, like trying to be, we talk about how we process things differently. To me, I'm like, okay, we're just done. We're over. It's moving on. But obviously,
And with me, it's I've got to make sense of it, and so that's just kind of my, I guess you could say, mental inner workings, and might relate to 1 or 2 out there.
So Ryan, when from the time that it ended to the time that you're like, God's after my obedience, not my performance, how long of a window are we looking at?
Honestly, it was a very short period of time. Just because even as we saw the writing on the wall and as things were kind of coming to a close, I was almost kind of going through, not necessarily a mourning period, but just kind of like a disappointment phase. And it was in the middle of that phase that, shortly after I felt like he was really kind of encouraging me in that. So I can't really give a time frame, but it wasn't long. It wasn't extended. I would say beyond a month and a half, 2 months or so.
Felt like 6. Just kidding.
Felt like 10 years.
Still feel like we're in it. What?
No, but so there was that, and how you dealt with that, which is awesome. And I love the conclusion that you came to, and that settled in you. And
that was really the only thing that kind of brought healing into the situation, was understanding how that all fit. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Liz Jen likes to tell me that's great turnaround time, just so you know. Nice turnaround time. But as from the ending of that to now, there's been some years here then of being in waiting, per se, and there's probably been some disappointment with that. So Reagan, tell me your perception of him processing. You said it felt like 6 months. But then even to now, of him processing, gosh, the call of God in my life, the purposes that he has for me, it's not looking like I expected. And that's a little disappointing off and on. Like, tell me how you process that as a wife, as you watch him in that wrestling.
I think it's a wrestle for me to be one, supportive, encouraging, continuing to speak life. Like, don't worry, God has a plan and purpose. Because he's got a super big calling on his life. He was working in his dream job before we got married. Then it was like, oh, but now we're planning a church. So that's, again, he'd be pastoring again, which he's just called to do. He's amazing at, and that doesn't come out. And so now he's working a job that, he's amazing at, but he just, honestly, he does not like it. And trying to support, and he has to keep this job because now we've got 4 kids, we've got insurance. So I feel the weight of that constantly. And when I know that he's just like, we have these discussions, like this, a peek into our lives from God's school insurance, just be like, his greatest fear, we don't share this, whatever. I love him. Is, is he going to be stuck doing this for the rest of his life? My greatest fear, that I'm going to have to be encouraging him in his job for the rest of my life. Okay. Like, I mean, honestly, well, obviously my girl's getting pregnant, not being married, that's in there too. Okay. There's a lot of things, but I just think as a couple, like we're really, and this is 13 years later. And I mean, he wouldn't change not marrying me. But for me, there's always kind of that little niggle of doubt of just like, oh my gosh, he gave up, niggle, his job on staff, full-time at a church, loving it, doing missions, traveling, pastoring college kids, to marry me, give it up, move to California, and now he's working in some job that he never thought he'd work in.
Back in 2000, I made a vow that I would never go back into public education.
Don't make vows.
And I've spent 15 years in public
Thank you
education.
for SBS. Click off. No. So I just think and again, like I said, we talk about the process. I might be the female, you might be the male, but the way we process is totally different. I'm a practical thinker, and I'm a very much like, hey, I just told you that, like, get on with it. And him, it's, he's for sure the deep thinker of us. And so with that, it comes the
Crying in the corner,
Okay, I wasn't going to admit that, but yeah, he is rocking back and forth. Like, just get out and go to work. So
All
I
right,
don't know. I
no
mean,
shame.
you guys too. Like, you guys process, like, you guys are different in personalities. I think that's the thing with married couples is just none of us, we're literally on the page 100% with all of our stuff. I'm saying that clearly, but just being on the same page doesn't mean,
that we process it the same way.
or our expectations are the same. Like, to me, I'm like, wow, we should just be thankful that you have this amazing job. We got phenomenal insurance. We've already used it almost every month of our kids' lives. So, like, we're not going anywhere. Like, even if you got a job, most ministry jobs don't pay that well. Now our insurance will be like, what? Like, nothing. So, I mean, there's just these different things. We're on the same hand. That's practical me. And then the other me is like, well, I'd rather have him happy and me learning how to use oils instead of going to the doctor and, whatever. So, I mean.
Yeah, we definitely process differently. And I'll tell you right now, if I'm going to be 100% candid, it's probably taken, so we've been married 17 and a half years, and I'd say it's probably taken 16 for me to appreciate that he processes differently. I think it's funny how we're like, why aren't you riled up about this? Like, why do you not care about this, is in my perception, right? That we want them to process, handle, view, and look at things the same way that we do. Funny thing is that I married him because he didn't handle life the same way as me. And that was attractive to me, that he was very, and we've got a dog down here that's like, what? You're leaving me out of the conversation. And so it's taken me a long time to actually appreciate that. And when you go through something really hard, even more so, because I think for a long time, I thought Eric was avoiding. And there might have been, if we were really honest, there might be, and he would probably admit to being, that might be one of his tactics of handling, is I'm just gonna not think about this right now, and every once in a while I'm like, gosh, I wish I had your ability to do that. Because I think that's probably more true of a lot of guys, is that they can just go, what? Something terrible just happened? Tragic? Oh, gotta go to work, time to go. And I'm like, and it was almost offensive to me that he could do that. Because I'm like, great, leave me here and deal with all of the turmoil by myself. But I think I don't think that he, even though he didn't speak about it, it doesn't mean that it didn't bother him. And so I know he shared with me, I had a season of my life where I went through massive disappointment. Can't say my turnaround time was as good as yours, Ryan. Massive disappointment and fear and betrayal. It kind of was just all rolled into one yucky ball. And that kind of left me in a really bad place. And I would communicate. Eric would also say he doesn't have to figure out if I'm processing something, because I'll make sure he knows, and I'll make sure exactly how I'm processing, and I'll let him know. Which is probably a little scary, right? Sometimes to hear the thoughts go through my mind. But I remember him sharing about actually when we were apart for 3 weeks because we were in the process of a move, and I had called him from back home and just was like, I'm not happy. I don't know if I'm gonna be happy. I'm not sure that this is gonna work. I don't even have confidence or hope that it will work. And he's in another town going, all right. So she is like just totally at this like thread of hope, close to giving up. And I remember you saying kind of how you process that here. So his silence doesn't necessarily mean that he's not processing. You may just handle it different. So I know, tell us about what you did during that time after I called you. I thought it was interesting anyway. Kind of let me in on it.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about it because it's funny because I feel like just in the idea of processing that there's a tendency in me to want to just jump back to what would just maybe be my first nature. And that's not always the right thing. Like, hey, let me just offer some words that will change your mindset, right? And then we'll be better and we'll move forward. That's kind of how I want to go into handling, if you will, struggle or some kind of issue or process it. Is to fix it. Yeah, is to fix it. I think for myself, though, that I do want to have kind of the, like, let me just pull back, let me process this. And that usually means some kind of alone time, which in this context I had, to be able just to go, all right, God, I don't know what's going on here or how I'm going to handle this, but I feel like my challenge is that to go, here's what we're dealing with, and I need to kind of think through the scenarios and the options, and then be in just kind of mindfulness of what God is communicating. And I'm trying to remember exactly in this case of like my next thoughts or what I did exactly that you're referring to right now for
there's always one person that has the bad memory and then another person whose memory is phenomenal. So I'm feeling for you right now, Eric. Okay.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I can think of some things literally that happen with different phone conversations after they happen, but I don't know, because I do have this sense of like, I want to pull back and process and maybe avoid a little bit. That's my like first tendency. Where processing and kind of pulling back to reflect and go, all right, let me just get my mind around this, I think is healthy. But then what after? I think in this instance, for me, I have to kind of force myself, if you will, to go, there's a fight to be had here. Like not with Jamie, but a fight for what God has for us. And what does that look like? What does it mean for me to communicate to Jamie, but just kind of in here's where we're at. How do I fight for this relationship, fight for what God has for us? And so, I mean, I know there were some particulars to that in even like the actual physical moving over here where Jamie was communicating one thing, like, don't do this, don't come and meet me in Butte, Montana on my way over, because she was a little bit of the mindset of, I don't know, I don't feel like you should be here. I'm kind of feeling this like hopelessness to it. And maybe we shouldn't even be around each other. And my response often, I shouldn't say often, but I know I have the thought of what is the opposite spirit? What is the, to come against this? And I don't always do that, but I know in this case, this particular one, if this is what you're referring to, is like, a communication of, I've heard what she said, and maybe I'm not offering the right things to say, but if I can physically act and do something to communicate that we are on the same team and I'm going to fight for what God has for us. It was me just physically going, despite what you said, let me come to Butte, Montana and just be there, surprise you. I'm here for you. We're going to come the rest of the way together as a team. Even if we feel like we're questioning this move, we're going to do it together because that's what God has for us. There's oneness in this. Is that kind of where some of your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I didn't actually.
Is that what you're talking about?
Did I do it right? Did I say what you want to say? No, I didn't have it formulated in my mind as to what you should say or not say. I think the reality is, and Cece last week, if you missed last week's teaching, Cece talked about the Good Samaritan, and I loved all the perspectives that she drew out of that story. I mean, if you've been in church for a long time, and even if you haven't, if you went to Sunday school at all, that was one that was on the felt board, was the Good Samaritan story. Mm-hmm. She drew out some beautiful perspective there. And I think that it can connect back to the Good Samaritan and how he approached the guy that was beat up. He didn't necessarily fix all of his circumstances. He just said, hey, I'm gonna take care of your immediate needs. Let's get you some clothes. Let's take you to a place and give you some shelter to protect you. I'm going to make sure you're going to be, set up to do well through this healing, through this time, through this process. And so he was just available. He was there and he was willing to get in the mess. Mm. And I think if we were going to have, as Cece said, a roadmap of loving well as spouses, what a great, especially loving well in the midst of struggle, disappointment, turmoil. Now, obviously, we wouldn't parallel every struggle we have with the struggle that the guy had on the side of the road. I mean, I wasn't, physically beat up and left for dead.
Yeah.
But sometimes we can feel like that in our spirit. We can feel like we're beat up and knocked down and left for dead. And that everything that was once alive can feel cold. And so I think your example, or what you just shared there, I think was a good example. And I didn't intend for you to share it, but I think that's great. It's a great parallel to what she was sharing last week, was how do we love well? It wasn't that Eric could fix it, because often, and I think you would say this, I went through a long period of time, and it was like over a year of unfixable feelings, unfixable thoughts. And no matter what he said, this is driving him nuts, but no matter how encouraging it sounded or how truth-filled it was, it didn't matter to me. Like, it just all sounded like cliche to me. It all sounded like that's the right thing to say and think, and I'd tell somebody else the same thing, but it's not doing anything for me. And so I think what I love about this is, I think guys probably, although I relate to this a lot, I like to fix things too. If I see the problem, especially if I can see kind of a root of a problem, I want to fix it. And so that's kind of my go-to as well. But I think a lot of guys want to fix. Do you relate to that, Ryan? That you just want to go, okay, what's the problem here? Let's figure out the strategy and let's fix this.
Normally my first inclination is kind of trying to discern, does this person want this thing fixed? And, and based on that, if I don't get that perception that they do, I'm not even going to go there. I figured I'd just save myself a lot of headache and time and really good ideas and thoughts that are, emptied out on someone else. But like when I first see, the solutions come to my mind, but it's like, okay, is this person, do they want it? It's kind of like, Jesus asking, the layman, do you want to be healed? And because sometimes people like to just spout off their problems or say, hey, this is where I'm at, but don't really want to move in the direction of getting something fixed. They just like to complain about the situation. And, at that point, trying to figure out, do I move on this? Do I not? And, even with my job, that's probably 80% of my day is dealing with situations and problems and trying to, decide, okay, does this person really want it fixed, or they just want to, complain about it? And, so
a personal example is just super stressed out, hit my limit, to be overcommitted, whatever. So, there's only one person you take it out on, right, ladies? Especially if you're married. So I just remember I was complaining, why we're going to another birthday party. We got 2 more parties that day to go to. Plus, we've been packed that week. I'm just exhausted. I just need some space. And I just made this comment. I was like, what's wrong? I was like, this is about, I see time alone. I had to go, you know what? We're supposed to be going away camping that weekend. I was like, you guys just go camping without me. I'm going to just stay home. And I'm thinking at that point, he's like, oh my gosh, wow, what's this? He's like, okay. I can't even tell you, I'm so livid. And then I realized, like, at the end, really, I was just saying I wanted time alone.
And but, you got it.
Yeah, I mean, he called my bluff. I went camping, let's just put it that way. But
that was honoring.
You say honoring or honoree?
I'm not sure. You decide.
A little bit of both. No, so Ryan, I think you're right, in that sometimes we're not in a place of wanting things to be fixed. I mean, sometimes I think to be just to be honest about every person is this journey, which is so cliche. It takes time for someone to be in the right spot, that God's truth, the encouragement, the resource that he brings, whatever it is, we have to be ready and willing to and open to it. So whatever we're wrestling with and struggling with internally, we have to be willing to let that down before God can come in. So you're right. There's times when your opinions won't matter and your solutions won't matter. And I can say that Eric, no matter how encouraging of a person he is, which most people find him to be very encouraging, it didn't encourage me a lick, and I didn't care what he had to say. But what did matter to me, though, and that I would just want to bring back the one more time, what did matter is that he did walk with me through the process, and that I didn't feel like I was processing alone. So Ryan, with you saying, I think outside of our home, when we're dealing with people that are, further out in our social circles, yes, there's kind of a boundary that we have to set that's healthy. But when we're one, wearing onesies, whatever it is, there is a choice to be made that they may not be ready for any kind of solution, but we do have to choose to walk with them and until they're ready and in their process to see a change, a solution, a moving forward, which that's a challenging thing of marriage because we're not always processing at the same place at the same time. So walking with each other in that can be really challenging. But I think if we go back to the roadmap of the Good Samaritan of processing that out, they were at different places, different cultures and everything. So his willingness just to be there and to be present was what ministered to him. And so I love that about that setup in marriage.
And to go along with, the which you just pulled out of that is, and I think that's probably the best thing is knowing that somebody, whether it's within our marriage or in the workspace and all that, is just being there, just ready for, and not because it's easy. For example, when you guys were sharing your story, how, Eric could have just checked out and just not being there consistently, just available and ready when your window had opened up to impart into that and to, just to be there for that because it's in our flesh. It's so easy just to be able to just say, forget it. They don't want this. They don't. And then we just turn it off completely rather than being faithful and just saying, okay, this is who I'm committed to. This is, we're going to go through this season. It's going to be, we're going to come to an end of it. Our marriage, our commitment to each other is bigger than this. So I'm sticking with it. And even if I don't get reciprocated what I'm trying to give her, that's fine, because in all reality, we all go through, that as well. I do that to Reagan as, she does that to me. And it's but that's, why we're in it for better or for worse is, So I just, when you mentioned that just kind of came to my mind.
Yeah, I think being there, I feel like, and maybe you guys can relate to this. I feel like I've got a lot of thoughts and a lot of words I wake up with every day. And so
no comment.
I think the reality is that more often than not, I think that you probably see it in ministry. You probably see it in your situation, Ryan, and the people that you lead, that people are just craving somebody to be present. I mean, I think of when Noah was on the operating table and I knew what they were doing. I knew that they were cutting into his brain. Like, we just needed fresh air. And he's like, you just want to go outside? I'm like, yeah, let's just go outside and walk, So we just walked and we didn't say anything. There was nothing to be said. It was in God's hands at that point. So it wasn't like I needed to be held. I didn't need tears to be wiped. I need somebody to walk with me, like go outside and breathe there with me, and be there. And I didn't feel alone during that time. And it wasn't because he had some kind of incredible thing to say to me or likewise, I didn't say anything to him. It was just being present. And so the choice that he made in Butte to go, Jamie said, don't show up, but he shows up, even if he doesn't have anything to say, the showing up is the factor. And I think that's what you were referring to again there, Ryan, the showing up of just being there, which seems super simple, but I think it's probably the best solution we've got as husband and wife is just continually to show up. So anyway, yeah, good stuff, you guys. We should probably let the She's Velvet Steel girls head into their day. But thank you for being willing to chat with us about this. There's probably more conversation that we could have further out of the process of showing up, walking out, walking with in marriage. Obviously, there's a lot to marriage and going through hard things together. Gosh, I mean, because there is a time that you do have to talk stuff out. Yeah. There is a time that you got to communicate, you can't just be quiet and silent all the time, but that's for another time, another day. But I like where it went today. It's good stuff. And I like you guys.
You're not too bad yourself.
Yeah, I wish you guys were here. And I'm super jealous of your son. Yeah. Do you realize it's been snowing constant?
I'm jealous of your snow. So.
Are you? Okay. Yeah. Well, can we do a house swap then?
I'm gonna melt.
There you go.
You guys come up here and live in our house for a while. And we'll go down there and live.
The house swap.
Vacation rentals. All right, you guys. Well, we're going to let you go. You're frozen at the moment, but Shizbel Vastil, thank you so much for joining us today. We'd love to hear how you have been there for your spouse been there for you during your moments, whether it's small or big, so that we can grow together and encourage each other in loving well. All right, you guys, have a great Monday. Happy President's Day.
Bye.
Bye.